Now that I had reached the pressure point realm, fierce young talismans were no longer of much use to me. Since he wanted them, I might as well just give them to him. When Wang Kun saw me shove a bunch of talismans over, his face turned pale with fright. He quickly waved his hand at me and said, "You can't do that. That's too much. I just need one." I smiled and said, "Didn't you say you wanted to buy it? Why are you complaining that it's too much? Just take it when I tell you to." Wang Kun didn't dare to take it no matter what. He pulled a long face and said, "But there are so many of them. How can I afford it?" This fellow usually looked capable and experienced, but at this moment, he looked sincere and cute. I shoved the talismans into his hands and waved my hand. "I'm not selling these to you. It's almost the new year." I left in a hurry, so I didn't prepare any New Year gifts. "You should take these talismans back and give some to Chief Wang and Dai Nanzhou. Then keep 2 for yourself. Consider it my New Year's gift to everyone." After listening to me, Wang Kun finally accepted the talismans. However, he still insisted on shoving the money in his hands to me. He said confidently, "The temples and Taoist temples where I come from have a rule. When you ask for talismans, you must give some money to show your sincerity. Otherwise, even if you get the talismans, they won't be of much use when you take them back." I didn't know if I should cry or laugh. In today's society, monks and Taoist priests would do anything to earn more money. It didn't matter if they were sincere or not. When they met ghosts and monsters, they wouldn't talk about idealism. However, Wang Kun insisted on giving me the money. I had no choice but to accept it. The cost of making these talismans wasn't low, so I just charged him for the cost. After seeing me accept the money, Wang Kun finally beamed with joy. After hearing me say that it was best to keep the talismans in a jade box, he immediately ran to a jade shop near the train station and bought a jade box. After carefully putting the talismans in the box, he put the box into his clothes. From time to time, he would touch it, afraid that he would lose it. Even after Wang Kun left, I still had a clear memory of how careful he was. However, after thinking about it, these talismans were slightly outdated to me. But to ordinary people, these talismans were more precious than money. They could save people at critical moments. It was especially true for people like Wang Kun, who had seen ghosts and monsters before. He couldn't be too careful. According to Wang Kun's behavior, if I went to Shenzhen to open a shop that specialized in selling talismans, the business would be booming. However, this thought disappeared in a flash. Although the path of cultivation was expensive, with the annual salary that Wang Yongjun had given me, I could support it. Moreover, I didn't have time to manage the shop. If I really opened it, I would have to work for a long time. The time it would be closed would be much longer than the time it was open. With this thought, I threw this thought to the side. On the way home, I chose to take the train. Although it was close to the end of the year, I chose to take the train to a scenic spot. There were very few people at the scenic spot. After I got on the train, I was the only one in the sleeper compartment. Coincidentally, I was happy to have some peace and quiet. I lay on the lower berth to catch up on some sleep. It was comfortable and carefree. However, the good times didn't last long. After the train had been on the road for more than 2 hours, we passed by a few big train stations. Very quickly, the sleeper compartment was filled with people. There were 3 layers of people going up and down, which made it hard for me to sleep. What was more unfortunate was that a beautiful woman with a plump body got on the compartment. Her seat seemed to be above mine. However, she threw her luggage on the bed and didn't have the intention to climb onto the bed. Instead, she sat on the bed next to me. This was like poking a hornet's nest. Within a few minutes, the men on the other beds all climbed down from their beds. Some were fast, some were slow. They laughed and sat on the lower berth, chatting with the plump beauty. In such a situation, I didn't know what to do. Just as I was about to use my Tao energy to seal my ears, I suddenly heard the woman talk about her occupation. She said that she worked as a wedding host. At first, I didn't pay much attention. But soon, she said that business wasn't good these days. Her wedding company didn't only accept business for weddings. In the recent half a year, they even accepted business for funerals and weddings. So, she was now the host of weddings and funerals. She often attended weddings in the morning and funerals in the afternoon. I guessed it was because of this occupation that the plump beauty had a cheerful personality. She chatted happily with the people around her. When the men heard her talking about this, they couldn't help but talk about funerals and ghosts. A group of people happily asked the beautiful woman if she was afraid when she hosted funerals. The woman waved her hand and said, "I'm not afraid. It's a big group of people. There's no reason to be afraid of a dead person. But let me tell you, ever since I hosted funerals, I've encountered some strange things." The group of people immediately became interested. They all asked her what strange things she had encountered. I smiled as I listened on the side. The job of presiding over weddings and funerals wasn't a new trend. This profession had existed for thousands of years. However, what was different from what this beautiful woman said was that in ancient times, this profession wasn't called presiding over a wedding, but rather it was called receiving guests. It wasn't because other people didn't care about funerals, but because they didn't have this kind of awareness. They didn't know that their ancestors had passed down this kind of job to them. Fang Min didn't understand it either. She only considered this kind of job. She didn't know what kind of responsibility she had to shoulder in the culture she had inherited. With that thought, I got out of bed and sat on the edge of the bed. I told Fang Min my thoughts. After I finished, Fang Min was bewildered. After a long time, she asked me skeptically, "Are you telling the truth?" Before I could answer, a few men who were listening to the gossip burst out laughing. They said to Fang Min, "Don't listen to his nonsense. Who cares about yang water and yin water these days? Even my 5-year-old nephew knows that we should believe in science and not be superstitious. We're old. How can we believe this kind of made-up story?" After they said that, they looked at me with hostility. I was bewildered. Then, I understood that they considered me a competitor who wanted to pursue Fang Min. I gave a wry smile. I didn't want to argue with them. I wrote my phone number on a piece of paper and put it on the table. Then I got up and went to the connecting compartment to smoke. Chapter 163. When I finished smoking and returned, the note on the small table had disappeared. I didn't care if Fang Min had taken it or not. I just continued to lie down and slowly moved the qi in my body, doing circulatory cycle revolutions between my meridians again and again. Even though I had the talent of the top 4 meridians, haste makes waste in cultivation. After entering the 1 aperture realm, I had been working hard for nearly a month, but the 2nd aperture in the Tian meridians was still not filled. There was still about half of it left. If this was the case for the top 4 meridians, then there was no need to mention other people's cultivation speed. Yi Piampian must have had some fortuitous encounter to be able to enter the glory of knowledge realm in a short period of 2 to 3 years. The journey was boring, and cultivation was also boring. I had spent more than 10 hours on the train, and I had spent it bit by bit. However, fortune and misfortune always came hand in hand. During this period of time, due to various reasons, I had been trying to improve my realm as soon as possible. It was inevitable that I was a little impatient in terms of my state of mind. However, after this bitter journey, that impatient desire to improve my realm had faded a lot. Unknowingly, my state of mind had regained its peace. During the last 2 hours on the train, I didn't rush to cultivate. Instead, I had a good sleep. Who would have thought that after sleeping, the Tao Qi in my body would increase a little more than it was before? This made me very confused. After careful analysis, I understood that the speed of cultivation was mostly related to one's state of mind. Previously, my impatient state of mind was what the Taoists referred to as a barrier, and also what the Buddhists referred to as a heart's devil. Affected by this, my cultivation speed slowed down. Later, after I got rid of this state of mind, it was just like what the Buddhists referred to as overcoming the heart's devil. After thinking through this, I clearly felt that my understanding of cultivation had deepened. Although it didn't seem to be of much use now, it would definitely be of great benefit to my future cultivation. However, after the train arrived at the station, I put aside the matter of cultivation. After being away from home for so many days, at this moment, no matter how much progress I had made in cultivation, it couldn't compare to my longing for my parents. After leaving the station, I went to the supermarket to buy some New Year's goods. Then I hurriedly took a taxi and went straight home. When I was young, my family wasn't very well off. It wasn't easy for my parents to support me while I was studying abroad, so I developed a good habit of being thrifty. This was the first time I was so extravagant as to directly take a taxi from the city's train station to the village where my family lived. It was more than 100 kilometers away, and my house was too remote, so the taxi driver charged more than 1,000 yuan. If it was in the past, I would have ignored it and immediately rushed to the bus stop across the street. I would have spent a few dozen yuan to transfer 2 or 3 buses home. But now, 1,000 yuan was nothing to me. I hurried all the way back home. As the surrounding scenery became more and more familiar, I was actually panicking inside. This was probably what the ancients said. The closer you are to your hometown, the more nostalgic you are. When I finally arrived home and pushed open the door, my parents, who were working in the yard, saw me. Their faces were filled with surprise. My mom hurriedly walked over, and while patting my clothes, she complained to me, "Why did you suddenly come back? You didn't even tell us beforehand, so that your dad could pick you up." Although she was complaining, she couldn't hide the smile on her face. She didn't let go of my hand and asked me how I was doing outside and asked me what I wanted to eat. My dad didn't move from the rattan chair in front of the house, but a hint of happiness appeared on his usually unsmiling face. He put out the cigarette in his hand, then told my mom to go to the store at the village entrance to buy a bottle of wine and to drink 2 cups with me tonight. Ever since I went to university, every time I came back home, my dad would invite me for a drink or 2. Usually, there were some things that he couldn't say out loud, but at this time, he would use the excuse of being drunk to tell me again and again. Although it was a little annoying, the love in his words couldn't be concealed. My mom habitually scolded my dad for his drinking problem and said that he was going to pass it on to me. Of course, as she said that, she already started to take off her apron and prepared to change her clothes. I quickly pulled her back and took out 2 bottles of wulianya from my bag and handed them to my dad with a smile. "Dad, I know you like to drink, so I brought 2 bottles for you when I came back." Seeing the packaging of the wine, my dad was stunned. When he saw the words wulianya on it, my dad's face darkened and subconsciously scolded me. "You brat, you only worked for a few days, and you already bought such good wine." "Brat's mom, you should go buy wine. It would be a waste for us to drink such good wine today. Put it away and take it out to drink on our 3rd son's wedding." His words made my nose sour. I hurried to pull him back and blinked a few times. Then I said, "Dad, I'm working and earning money now. We don't have to live so frugally anymore. Let's drink this wulianya today." "Yeah." My mom also smiled on the side and had a proud expression on her face. "Third son can earn money now. You two are happy today. Let's drink this good wine." He smiled at his juniors and was about to say something, but I stopped him and said, "Nothing. It's the new year, so we came here to wish Lalai Zhou a happy new year." Zhou Jia was prepared to argue with us. However, after listening to me, she swallowed the words she wanted to say. Reluctantly, she brought us through the door. We hadn't even entered the house when Lalai Zhou heard the commotion and rushed over. As soon as he saw us, he cursed, "Zhou Hedgehog, what are you doing here? I already told you, I bought the land with Su Youfu. My father is already buried in it. It's too late for you to say anything now. If you dare to ask me to dig my father up again, do you believe that I won't smash your house today?" The smile on my dad's face also froze. He opened his mouth and wanted to argue with him, but he, who had been honest his whole life, couldn't say anything as his face turned red. In the end, I said coldly, "Uncle Lai, my dad and I are here to pay our New Year's greetings to your family." "What? Is your family rich, and us poor relatives can't even enter?" Lao Laizhou lowered his head and looked at the desserts and alcohol in my hands, then sneered. "Third brat, you're someone who went to university, and you still have the nerve to bring these crappy desserts in your hands? You're right, you won't even be able to get in today." I was going to give him one last chance, but it seems like I was too soft-hearted. I nodded and looked at him. "All right, we won't be going in today, but I'm going to call you Lao Laizhou one last time. There are some things that people do, and God is watching. Don't regret it when the time comes." Then I left with my father. When we walked out of the door, I heard Lao Laizhou's arrogant voice saying something. "This brat's brain has gone stupid from studying, and I'm too happy to regret it." I didn't mind. After we left, I smiled and comforted my father for a while. Then we returned home together. Just as we arrived at the door, my mom hurriedly came over to ask us about the situation. In the end, after saying a few words, she lowered her head and saw that we were still holding the snacks in our hands. She couldn't ask anything else and could only sigh while comforting us. That afternoon, I hid in my room and used the weasel hair brush and the yellow talisman paper I had brought with me to make a special talisman. Then I wandered around the village and brought back some peach and locust tree branches. After I was ready, I took advantage of the night to go to my family's ancestral grave. I used the talisman and the yin and yang peach and locust tree branches to set up an ancestral seeking formation between Lao Laizhou's grave and my family's. This kind of geomancy formation was used to search for the ancestors. Its function was similar to paternity tests nowadays. However, there was no such method in ancient times. Geomancy masters often used this kind of geomancy formation to help people find their roots. There is a price to pay for doing such things. This made me even more puzzled. Previously, I was wondering if this fellow didn't know about the Earth Master realm. But now, it seemed that he understood. Since he understood, why did he dare to ask me to pay the price in front of me? Before I could say anything else, the sound of a car engine came from the entrance. Not long after, an old man in his 50s or 60s walked in with two middle-aged men. Seeing these people, my gaze finally turned cold. The two middle-aged men had an acupoint sealing realm cultivation that was not inferior to mine. As for the old man, I could only feel the movement of Tao energy from his body, but I couldn't see his realm. This kind of situation could only occur when the other party's cultivation was higher than mine. This old man was at least a mid-level acupoint sealing realm feng shui master. No wonder Wang Zikin was so confident. He had already found a backer. Without waiting for me to understand, Wang Zikin ran in front of the old man and greeted him with a flattering expression. "Director Chen, did you have a smooth journey?" Director Chen didn't pay attention to him. He looked around and pointed at me. He asked Wang Zikin calmly, "The person you said used feng shui to harm people. Is he this fellow?" Hearing that, Wang Zikin immediately nodded. He added oil to the fire and said, "It's him." For no reason, he used an ancestral seeking formation. He let the ancestral energy from his family's grave cover Lai Laizhou's grave in the village. This caused Laizhou's family to have bad luck if they were even the slightest bit disrespectful towards them. From before the new year until now, Laizhou's chicken farm has lost several hundred chickens. His family members have also been injured many times. Until now, they are living a life worse than death. Hearing that, Laizhou and his son, who were standing at the side, immediately came forward and cried. They exaggerated their experiences in the past few days. Laizhou, that old thing, even said that he had been diagnosed with a terminal illness. I laughed coldly in my heart. It had only been a few days. Even if he didn't eat, drink, or sleep, and stayed at home to scold my family every day, he definitely wouldn't have been diagnosed with a terminal illness. Now that he was crying so heartbroken, it must have been hard on him. After listening to their crying, Director Chen didn't say anything else. He walked to my side and looked me up and down. Then he said in a clear voice, "You little brat, you have such a high cultivation level at such a young age. You have a bright future ahead of you. Why didn't you cultivate properly? Why did you walk the path of evil and use feng shui to harm people? Do you know that in the world of metaphysics, the biggest taboo is to attack normal people? You will only destroy yourself by doing this." His words were very reasonable, but his indiscriminate attitude made me angry. He just commanded the two young men to carry Wang Zikin away and throw him outside the courtyard. After everything was settled, Chen Xuanda turned his head to look at me. A smile instantly appeared on his face as he apologized to me. "Brother Zhou, this matter has been thoroughly investigated. Our Taiyuan branch had a parasite that wrongly accused Brother Zhou. Now that Wang Zikin has been expelled from the branch, this old man also wants to apologize to Brother Zhou. I hope Brother Zhou can be magnanimous. The previous exaggerated way of handling the situation, in addition to his current humble attitude, made me stand there dumbstruck. I really didn't know what to say. Chen Xuanda didn't seem to mind. He even walked over and intimately said, 'However, Brother Zhou, it can be said that we didn't get to know each other through fighting. If it wasn't for today's matter, I wouldn't have known that the world-famous young phoenix was actually from our Taiyuan branch. Although it's a bit regretful that you didn't join our Taiyuan branch, no matter what, you are still the pride of our Taiyuan branch. Today's matter was this old man's fault. I don't know if Brother Zhou would do me the honor and let this old man be the host and properly apologize to you.' Having said this much, I didn't have any intentions of pursuing today's matter. However, I clearly didn't need to agree to his invitation. Just as I was about to wave my hand to decline, I frowned and suddenly thought of something. I hesitated for a moment, but in the end, I didn't directly refuse. Instead, I asked him to postpone the meeting until tomorrow. Of course, Chen Xuanda didn't refuse and hastily agreed. After exchanging some pleasantries, he hurriedly left with his people. At this time, a large group of neighbors had gathered around us. Seeing a big shot like Chen Xuanda fawning over me, their eyes were wide open. After they left, they couldn't help but discuss the matter. Earlier, the neighbors had looked at me as if I were their nephew, but now their gazes were filled with respect, making me feel inexplicably awkward. Fortunately, they didn't stand around for long and slowly dispersed. At this time, I hurried to my parents and carefully checked their bodies. After confirming that they weren't injured, I heaved a sigh of relief. I relaxed, but my parents were still worried. They asked me, "Third child, didn't you say that you were going to be a geomancer? How did you become the vice president? Also, you are a geomancer. How come you're fighting?" My parents had clearly seen me use the rhino finger seal on the two middle-aged men. Fortunately, besides geomancers at the Geomancer Master realm and above, ordinary people couldn't see the light fingers formed by Tao energy. Otherwise, my parents would have been scared out of their wits. I grinned and didn't know how to explain. I could only tell them that it was the application of Geomancer in daily life. That night, I sat on my bed and slowly circulated my Tao energy. I was thinking about meeting Chen Xuanda the next day. The reason why I had agreed to have dinner with him was because of one thing. When we were by the Yellow Spring River, Liang Tianxin had told me that he wanted to investigate the underground palace under the 28 Fiend Yellow Springs formation. He had found everyone except me and the fatty. Not only that, but he had also imprisoned their souls and refined them into Yin souls. Liang Tianxin was the Taoist master, so I couldn't snatch the souls of those people from his hands. But no matter what, the red shadow came out of that grave, and the things that happened in the underground palace had a lot to do with the red shadow. If it was related to the red shadow, it was also my business. I felt really sorry for Old He and the others. According to what had happened that year, Old He was a member of the local student selection committee. I could also find information about the people he had brought with him. Since Liang Tianxin had found those people, they must have died a horrible death. Their descendants couldn't live a good life either. I wanted to visit them and try to make it up to them. Because of this, I had agreed to have dinner with Chen Xuanda. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to talk to a bureaucrat like him. After thinking about it for a while, I prepared to sleep. However, right at this moment, the ghost seal on my arm suddenly released a scorching hot current rushing through my meridians. In just a blink of an eye, I was in so much pain that I almost screamed. At the same time, my body was soaked in sweat. Chen Xuanda was probably at this realm, and my cultivation at the 5th acupoint sealing realm had actually surpassed his. However, he was taking it for granted that it was all due to talent. I tried to change the topic and asked him where we were going to eat. In the end, he casually said a name and continued to sigh. Back then, this old man was only a half-meridian talent, and it took me 20 years to reach the middle acupoint sealing realm. But Bro Zhou, you actually surpassed this old man in just 1 month at the Young Phoenix gathering last year. This is simply, he couldn't even find a word to describe it after a long time. Just like that, for the rest of the meal, it was basically Chen Xuanda sighing, and I being humble. As for Chen Xuanda and his group, the more they discussed, the more they admired me, and the more they spoke to me. In the end, when I asked him to help me look up some information about the Metaphysics Association, Chen Xuanda didn't hesitate and hurriedly nodded in agreement. However, when I saw Old He Yuanshan and the others, Chen Xuanda was stunned and didn't speak for a long time. I frowned and couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong? Is there any inconvenience?" Chen Xuanda reacted and looked a little excited. He shook his head and said to me, "It's not inconvenience, it's because He Yuchi is my master, and He Yuanshan is my junior." This time, even I had a strange expression. This Chen Xuanda was actually Old He's disciple. We looked at each other for a long time, and Chen Xuanda asked me with a puzzled expression, "Bro Zhou, why are you looking for information about my master and junior? Could it be that Bro Zhou knows my master?" Old He and I didn't just know each other, although it was Red Shadow who gave me the death scripture that allowed me to officially step onto the path of metaphysics. It was Old He who truly let me see metaphysics and aroused my interest in it. The past was still vivid in my mind, and I always had the thought of paying Old He a visit. Who would have thought that before I could take action, we were already separated from each other? I nodded and said in a low voice, "Grandpa, he saved my life when I was young, and we went through some things together. It's a pity that I haven't come to find him since then. Chun Shwanda didn't notice the disappointment in my tone and said with a puzzled expression, "That's strange. I haven't heard my master mention your name all these years." I sighed. Liang Tianxin had already told me that I was no longer in old he's memories. I didn't know what rules he was talking about, but I felt sad when I thought about it. I drank the wine in front of me in one gulp, then asked, "Uncle Chun, when did something happen to Grandpa He and the others?" Chun Shwanda was flattered when he heard me call him Uncle Chun, but his face darkened when he heard what I said. He sighed and said, "It was in the spring of the year before last." At that time, my master had just retired from our Taiyuan branch. I don't know what he was researching every day, but he didn't live in the city, but in your county. At that time, I had already taken over my master's position as the vice president, and I was busy every day. I only knew that something had happened when I received a call from your county's Public Security Bureau. When I went to investigate, I found that my master and the other souls had been taken away, and only soulless corpses were left. From this method, it seems like it was done by those ghost and corpse-rearing sections. But there are no such crooked people in our vicinity. After that, I secretly investigated for a long time, but until now, I still don't have the slightest clue. I nodded, but I didn't tell him about Liang Tianxin. He was a heavenly master, and if I told him about it, it would only add to Chun Shwanda's worries. I could only keep this grudge in my heart. Sooner or later, I would find Liang Tianxin and settle this grudge. After the meal, Chun Shwanda took me to the Taiyuan branch. He asked someone to find information about the others for me while he took me to the president's office. He said that he wanted to introduce the president, Xie Lingyun, to me. Xie Lingyun looked to be about the same age as Chun Shwanda, but his cultivation base was much higher than Chun Shwanda's. He had the glory of knowledge cultivation base. Contrary to my expectation, Xie Lingyun didn't seem to be enthusiastic towards me at all. On the contrary, he was somewhat indifferent. After chatting with me for a while, he said that he had something to do and sent me out of the office. Although I felt that it was strange, I didn't think much of it. However, not long after that, Chun Shwanda came back with a gloomy face. He told me that the people he had sent to investigate had been refused at the door. President Xie said that he wasn't a member of the branch, so he didn't have the right to look at the members' information. What did Xie Lingyun mean? Although his cultivation base was at the glory of knowledge realm, he shouldn't completely disregard me, right? Ever since I revealed my 4 Meridians talent, even the headquarters, Yang Shilong, Danfeng, and the others were very polite to me. He was just the president of a small Taiyuan branch. Why didn't he give me face? I really couldn't understand, so I had Chun Shwanda go and ask around. In the end, he quickly got the result. He hurriedly ran back and asked me with a grave expression, "Zhou Yi, did you cripple the arm of the Liu family's first son, Liu Xinyang, at the Young Phoenix gathering?" So it was the Liu family. These days, the Liu family hadn't made any movements. I thought that a metaphysical family, like the Liu family, would care about their face and wouldn't investigate this matter. I didn't expect that I would suddenly hear the Liu family's name. After forcing myself to calm down, I called out to Chun Shwanda again and said to him, "Uncle Chun, from President Xie's attitude, this matter was most likely leaked to the Liu family by him. If the Liu family comes looking for us, they will most likely find President Xie first. If it's possible, please help keep an eye on President Xie these few days. Once the Liu family appears, immediately call me." The current relationship between Chun Shwanda and me was no longer the same as before, but after I said that, he pondered for a moment before saying to me with a wry smile, "I can help you with this matter, but that's all I can help you with. It's not that I'm not loyal, but after Master and my juniors left, I'm the only one left in the older generation in our branch. The group of juniors are all counting on me. I can't guarantee that master's teachings will be passed down, but I have to guarantee that I will raise this group of children smoothly. I'm really sorry. After hearing his words, my opinion of him had completely changed. After old He Yuanshan, and the others were killed by Liang Tianxin, there were only some youngsters of the third generation left in their branch besides him. This included He Yuanshan's only son and old He's only grandson. With such a mission on his shoulders, it was no wonder that Qin Shuanda had such a personality. I nodded and said to him gratefully, "Uncle Qin, it's already very good of you to be able to help me up to this point. In addition, I have some money with me. We, the people of the metaphysics world, start cultivating from a young age, so we can't lack money. Take it and give it to the children." In addition, there were other people involved in that matter. If it's possible, I'd like to ask Uncle Qin to take care of the descendants of those people. After saying that, I handed over a bank card that I had prepared earlier. This card contained the 3 million RMB that Wang Yongjun had previously given me. Qin Shuanda was stunned and said with a frown, "It's only right to take care of the descendants of those people, but this matter doesn't have much to do with you. Why do you have to do this?" I shook my head with a wry smile. "In fact, this matter has a lot to do with me, but I can't tell you the reason for it for the time being. You must take this money. In addition, I'll transfer some money to this card every year." Qin Shuanda was silent for a while, but in the end, he still took the card. It wasn't convenient for me to stay here for long, so I hurriedly left the Taiyuan branch and rushed back home. From that day onwards, I stayed at home and didn't dare to go far. At the same time, I thought of a way to deal with the Liu family. However, no matter how hard I thought, I couldn't come up with a solution. With my parents here, I couldn't run away by myself. If I brought my parents along, where could I run to? Chapter 169. My parents still wanted to say something to me, but it was already too late. In this desperate situation, I took out my phone and called Yi Pian, but I couldn't get through to her. In the end, I could only send her a message and tell her that the Liu family had found my house. The people from the Metaphysics Union couldn't be relied on, but in this desperate situation, this was the last thing I could do. After sending the message, I didn't expect the Metaphysics Union to appear, so I hurriedly ran out of the door. Lu Xinyang and the others didn't have any intention of hiding their whereabouts, so I could easily sense their direction. At this moment, I couldn't care less about the person guarding the door. After going out, I hastily rushed in Lu Xinyang's direction. The person guarding the door also followed closely behind me, but he quickly realized that my target was Lu Xinyang and the others, so he stopped. Lu Xinyang's group was really fast. When I was at home, I sensed that they were around 1 kilometer away from my house. However, when I ran out, I bumped into a black sedan with a Beijing license plate 200 or 300 meters away. After noticing me, the black car immediately stopped. The car door opened, and a few people got out. It was similar to the information that Qin Shuanda had provided. Besides Lu Xinyang, there were 4 other people, but I couldn't see through their strength. One of them was a black-robed old man, who even gave me a faint feeling that I was facing Liang Tianxin. Lu Xinyang's temperament was also very different from before. In the past, he was obviously arrogant, and his eyes were filled with arrogance. But now, his expression was much colder, and his left sleeve, starting from the joint, was hanging down emptily. He actually didn't install anything like a prosthesis, and just let his broken arm be exposed. After seeing me, Lu Xinyang's eyes instantly lit up, and the corner of his mouth rose into a cold smile. He asked me, "Brother Zhou, You seem to be in a hurry. Where are you going?" I knew that he was most likely trying to tease me, like an eagle trying to catch a chick, but I didn't dare to be angry. I lowered my head and said to Lu Xinjiang in a calm voice, "I know why you are here. No matter who was right or wrong, I crippled one of your arms. If you want, I can cripple my own arm right now. Of course, you can also do it yourself." After I finished speaking, before Lu Xinjiang could say anything, the black-clothed elder snorted and said to me in disdain, "One arm? Your lowly life can't even compare to half an arm of my grandson." Grandson? I was stunned. No wonder this old man's aura was so terrifying. Could he be the current head of the Lu family, Lu Xinjiang's grandfather? I felt even more bitter in my heart. If the head of the Lu family personally came out, then it seemed that the Lu family was determined to deal with me. In this situation, even if the metaphysics headquarters found out about this, they probably wouldn't be able to do anything. At this moment, Lu Xinjiang smiled and said to the black-clothed elder, "Third grandpa, he is very popular in the metaphysics headquarters. He has a peak 4 meridians talent. His future will be limitless." The black-clothed elder also sneered, "For meridians talent, that will only happen when he grows up. If he dies now, in the younger generation, your talent will be number 1. As for that Yi Piampian, she's just a woman. In the future, after she marries into our Lu family, no one in the younger generation will be able to threaten our Lu family's position." As the two of them echoed each other, I suddenly understood. Perhaps the Lu family didn't just want to take revenge on me. They also wanted to get rid of a potential threat. Just like what the old man said, as long as I wasn't around, Lu Xinjiang would be the number 1 person in the younger generation. Thinking about it, a large family with tens of years of history, although it couldn't compare to the Qinling Han family or the Mang Mountains Zhang family, it definitely wasn't a reckless family. No matter what it was, it would definitely consider the bigger picture. However, in this case, it seemed that there was no hope for me to survive today. I remained silent for a while before raising my head to look at Lu Xinjiang. In a low voice, I said again, "You can take me away now. No matter how you deal with me, don't do it in front of my family. That way, your Lu family won't lose face." This was my last hope. Lu Xinjiang definitely wouldn't let me go. It was obvious that the Lu family wanted to kill me. In this situation, this was the only thing I could hope for. At this moment, Lu Xinjiang smiled at me and walked in front of me. He extended his hand and hammered me. He said gently, "Brother Zhou, what are you talking about? My grandpa is just joking with you. I'm just here to have fun. I just happened to hear that your family is here. How can I not go in and visit Uncle and Auntie?" After saying that, he still wore a smile and looked at me warmly. My heart was ice cold. Lu Xinjiang was so ruthless. He didn't even want to give me any face. When begging was no longer of any use, the only way left was to risk their lives. I clenched my teeth, and through all of the talismans I had on me at the black-robed elder. These talismans were mostly the fierce yang talismans and in-gathering talismans that I had used in the past. These 2 talismans instantly gathered a large amount of yin and yang energy. After they collided in the air, there was a loud explosion. However, my target wasn't the black-robed elder. These talismans were only there to obstruct his vision. My target was Lu Xinjiang. When I threw the talismans, I didn't use any energy. Instead, I pounced on Lu Xinjiang and hugged him. At the moment I hugged him, my hands immediately formed a golden light seal. My dad spat on the ground and said with a heroic voice like the chief of the underworld, "How much strength can a brat like you have? You can't even match the strength of Laozi's Ho. All of you can come at me together. If you want to bully my kid, then don't even think about getting anything good today." The smile on Lu Jinyang's face became even wider, and he said faintly, "Whether I have strength or not, don't come to a conclusion too early, uncle." As soon as he said that, his body flashed, and with a speed that couldn't be seen by the naked eye, he fiercely slapped my dad's face. When he returned to his original spot, my dad didn't even have time to move the hoe in his hand, but his entire body staggered and fell to the ground. His tanned face swelled up. "Uncle, do you think I have strength now?" Lu Jinyang was still smiling warmly. He looked like a university student studying in the city, but his mouth was saying the most vicious words in the world. He didn't use his Dao Qi and only used his own strength, so my dad could still struggle to get up from the ground with the hoe. After he got up, he once again raised the hoe in front of him. His words were already somewhat unclear, but he still had that unscrupulous look on his face as he fiercely said, "Brat, Lousy is a generation lower than you. Do you really think that Lousy can't do anything to you?" With that, he shouted, and the hoe in his hand swung towards Lu Jinyang. His speed was very fast, so fast that he didn't look like a 50 to 60-year-old farmer, but rather like an old hen protecting its chicks. The hoe that could only be used to hoe the fields was like a treasured blade that fiercely slashed towards the enemy. However, after the hoe slashed down, Lu Jinyang, who was standing there, had already disappeared. Instead, he had inexplicably run to his side. At this moment, Lu Jinyang was still calm and said slowly, "Uncle, it seems that you really can't do anything to me." With that, he slapped the other side of my dad's face as if he was swatting a mosquito. This time, he used a lot of strength. My dad's body was like a spinning top that spun a few times in the air before falling to the ground again. Blood continuously flowed from the corner of his mouth. However, even though he was seriously injured, my dad wasn't the least bit afraid. He used both hands to support himself and tried to get up from the ground. Unfortunately, he tried a few times, but he didn't succeed. In the end, he could only turn over and spit at Lu Jinyang. He used all his strength to wave his hand as if he wanted to hit this dog with the hoe again. However, it was a pity that his hoe had already disappeared. After crazily waving it for a long time, not only was it unable to harm a single hair on Lu Jinyang's head, but it also aggravated his own injuries. He coughed loudly, and blood constantly flowed out. The sound of his coughing was like a sharp file that was crazily cutting into my heart. Chapter 171. Dad, Mom. A mournful voice finally gushed out from my mouth, along with a mouthful of heart blood that was stuck in my chest. The black-clothed elder didn't remove the restriction on my body. The reason why I made a sound was because I had used up all of my Tao energy and the dark green energy to crazily squeeze my heart, causing a mouthful of heart blood to flow out. At the same time that my vocal cords were destroyed, I let out a final scream. However, that was all I could do. After screaming, blood continuously gushed out from my mouth, along with a heart-wrenching pain. However, I couldn't feel it at all. I only wanted to crawl forward and dig my parents out from the ruins. I wanted to kneel down and kowtow to Lu Jinyang to beg him to save my parents. But I can't even do the humblest of thoughts. My body still couldn't move as blood and tears covered my entire body. Everything in front of me was already blurry, but my mind was abnormally clear from the pain. The black-clothed elder's voice sounded in my ear. He seemed to be asking for Lu Jinyang's opinion. "Jinyang, let's leave after killing this brat. The Metaphysics Society must have received news of this. We shouldn't delay any further." I blankly listened to their judgment of my fate, but there wasn't a single ripple in my heart. Lu Jinyang seemed to be silent for a long time before he finally said with a smile, "I suddenly don't want to kill him. My broken arm will accompany me for the rest of my life." How can I let him die so easily? Third grandpa, just cripple his cultivation and let him live on. He can only watch as I advance towards the peak, while he can only live in pain and self-blame for the rest of his life. The black-clothed elder seemed to be frightened by his words. After a slight hesitation, he didn't say anything else. He only walked over and placed his hand on my shoulder. As he moved, a thick and abundant chi of the way entered my shoulder. In the blink of an eye, it reached my meridian of the heavens. After destroying my meridians, the terrifying chi of the way gathered in my 8 extraordinary meridians and violently exploded. Not only did he want to destroy my cultivation, but he also wanted to destroy my talent. The pain in my body didn't affect me in the slightest. After letting out that miserable scream, I was already numb from the pain. After doing all of this, the black-clothed elder finally released the restriction on me. After seeing my body softly fall to the ground, he left my side and walked straight to Lu Jinyang's side before saying gloomily, "That's enough." Lu Jinyang walked over and squatted beside me. He looked down at me and sighed in pity. "Top tier, 4 meridian talent. It's gone just like that." What a pity. At this moment, his voice had already become bored to death, as if he no longer had any interest. He gave me one last look of disgust before turning around and hurriedly leaving with the black-clothed elder and the others. In the bleak winter village, no one knew what method the Liu family had used. Even though they had caused such a huge commotion, none of the neighbors appeared. It was as if no one had noticed what had happened here. After Lu Jinyang and the rest had left, I didn't know how much time had passed before the rumbling sound of an excavator sounded from the surroundings. It seemed that someone was heading over here. Up until now, my mind was still clear and I hadn't fainted. I didn't even hear what Lu Jinyang said before he left, nor did I hear the sound of a car. I only used my hands to support myself on the ground again and again, trying to gather my strength to climb up. However, I failed over and over again. I didn't know how many times I tried, but I finally managed to support myself up with trembling hands. I didn't have the time to climb up, nor did I have the time to check my body. I also didn't have the time to feel the pain in my body. I could only numbly and calmly crawl forward. I didn't know how much time had passed before I finally crawled to the courtyard that was in ruins. I weakly started to move the bricks under my body. The bricks that were as light as paper in my eyes in the past were now as heavy as a mountain. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't move a single stone. However, I didn't give up. I coughed and gasped for breath as I continued to move towards the ruins. At that moment, a few people wearing workers' uniforms walked to my side. The leader lowered his head to look at me. Then he frowned and ordered the others, "Take this person away and send him to the hospital. The rest of you drive the forklift and quickly clean up this place." As soon as he said that, 2 people quickly walked over. Each of them grabbed one of my arms and pulled me up from the ground. Then they dragged me into a car. At this moment, I finally broke down. I tried to struggle with all my might, but those 2 ordinary workers were like 2 heavenly masters to me. They exerted a bit of force with their arms, and all my struggles were suppressed. I finally gave up all hope. I took one last glance at my house that had already turned into ruins. Then my vision turned black, and I fainted. I had a very long dream. In the dream, I turned into a mouse one moment, then into a deity the next. However, most of the time, I saw myself as an angry monkey. I lifted my head to look at the sky and bent down to look at the ground. There was an indescribable brutality in my heart that made me want to tear the world apart. I didn't know how much time had passed when I slowly woke up. I struggled to prop myself up. I found that I was lying on an exquisite bed. that had a nice fragrance. Although his body was still a little sore, it was more of a warm and comfortable feeling. I couldn't help but have an illusion that everything that had happened before was just a dream. Lu Jinyang hadn't found me, my parents hadn't died, and my house hadn't turned into ruins. Chapter 172. Yi Pianpian's temperament seemed to have changed greatly. She wasn't as cold and arrogant as she used to be. She pressed my shoulder and nagged a lot, but I couldn't even hear a single word clearly. I didn't know how long it had been, but she finally gave up. She let go of my shoulder and stood up with the wooden bowl. She glanced at me in disgust before leaving in a hurry. I thought that she was going to abandon me, but then Yi Pianpian came over every day with a wooden bowl in her hand and carefully fed me medicine. I didn't complain and didn't even take the medicine. I just lay there numbly, unable to find my direction and struggling like a machine. Yi Pianpian stuffed something into my mouth, and I swallowed it. My mouth was often scalded by the hot medicine, but I didn't feel any pain. Instead, I felt inexplicably comfortable because of the stinging pain. I lived on the bed like a pig. I thought that Yi Pianpian wouldn't put up with me for too long, but unexpectedly, Yi Pianpian came over on time every day for a month. Every few days, she would even turn over my body with a look of disgust, even though her actions were rough. Sometimes, she would even throw me off the bed. But inexplicably, the deathly stillness in my heart seemed to dissipate a little. One day, more than a month later, Yi Pianpian came to my bed again. She didn't hold a wooden bowl, as usual, but a piece of clothing and a wooden box. Her expression seemed to be colder than before. She threw the things in her hands onto the bed and said to me coldly, "Shou-yi, I checked you yesterday. Your body has recovered. Although you can't cultivate for the time being, it's not a problem for you to get out of bed and walk. Grandpa Li originally wanted to help you with the grudge between you and the Lu family, but the Lu family is too deeply involved with the Metaphysics Association. Even Grandpa Li can't directly take action against the Lu family. So, you have to take revenge with your own hands. Don't think that you can't cultivate after your meridians are blocked. Grandpa Li checked your body before and said that there's a special power in your body that's helping you repair your body. As long as you work harder, the problem with your meridians will recover sooner or later." Hearing what he said, I suddenly became more spirited. I couldn't believe it. Special power? Is she talking about the dark green power? Who was this Grandpa Li she was talking about? After thinking for a long time, I remembered that she had told me before that she was the President Li Guang who had given me the fan. At this time, Yi Pianpian seemed to be silent for a while, and then she continued, "Grandpa Li also asked me to tell you that the true dragon vein is very helpful for your recovery. As long as you nourish your body with the true dragon vein every day, you can speed up the recovery of your meridians." I furrowed my brows and pondered, but I couldn't remember if I had thrown the broken compass away or if I had kept it with me. The items that I had, whether it was the death scripture, the jade bracelet, or the dark green bead, were all rare treasures. It wasn't that I was arrogant, but even a heavenly master would be tempted by these items. But now they had been returned intact. He didn't covet anything from me, and didn't even care about the true dragon's vein. Why did President Li do this? Could it be that it was like what Director Song Xing had said when he had brought the square sky fan over? President Li admired the geomancy question that I had answered during the dragon seizing tournament. This was too inconceivable. Pure admiration couldn't have reached such a level. After thinking for a long time, I still couldn't understand. In the end, I could only put these questions aside. No matter who had written that note, the words on it were correct. No matter what, I had to go and retrieve my parents' remains. I lifted the quilt and jumped off the bed. As soon as I touched the ground, my knees went soft, and I fell to the ground. I hadn't moved for a long time, although Yi Piampian would occasionally come back to help me move. My muscles had already withered. My joints and nerves had been oppressed for too long, so much so that I had temporarily lost the ability to walk. I supported myself on the edge of the bed and slowly stood up. After a long time, I finally regained my muscles and got used to the rhythm of walking. After that, I rested in my room for a day. When I woke up the next day, my body had finally returned to normal. I put on my clothes and put on the jade bracelet and other items. It was the first time in over a month that I had walked out of my room. After getting out of the house, I found myself in an ordinary house in the countryside. The surroundings were empty, and I could only see other houses in the distance. I tried to check the other rooms in the courtyard, but all of them were locked. It was clear that there was no one here except for me. I gave up and locked my room. Then, I leisurely walked out of the room. This place was a deserted village. It was probably where Yi Piampian usually lived. As for President Li, I didn't know their relationship, but I guessed he usually lived here. I walked to the roadside and waited for more than half an hour. Finally, I got on a bus that was heading to the city. Since my throat wasn't very comfortable, I didn't ask where I was after getting on the bus. I just paid the fare and waited for another half an hour. When I entered a bustling city, I found that I was in the suburbs of the capital. The metaphysics headquarters wasn't far from this suburban county. I guessed that Grandpa Li and the others lived near the headquarters. After getting off the bus, I lifted my eyes to look in the direction of the city. I can see your meridians. Big brother, it seems that you won't be able to cultivate in the future. The person who injured you is really hateful. But big brother, don't worry. Tong Tong will definitely speed up her cultivation in the future to protect big brother. I didn't know if it was because I had been too pretentious recently, but when I heard Tong Tong's words, I felt a lump in my throat. When I woke up on Yi Piampian's bed, my only thought was to die. At that time, I felt that I had no one left in this world. I didn't have any family, and I didn't have any kinship. Living was no different from dying. But now, I didn't think that way. Whether it was Tong Tong, Grandpa Li who left me the note and didn't care about the true dragon's vein, or even Yi Piampian, they were all people who cared about me. They all made me feel warm. I sniffled and said to Tong Tong with a smile, "Don't worry. Actually, Big Brother can still cultivate. A grandpa told me that as long as I use the true dragon's vein to nourish it for a few days, my meridians will recover to their original state." Speaking of this, I suddenly remembered the true dragon's saliva that Grandpa Li had mentioned. I had thought about it carefully on the way here. When I was in the cave of the true dragon's vein, I had seen a small drop of milky, white liquid floating below the mouth of the true dragon's vein. Although I was amazed at that time, I didn't pay much attention to the drop of liquid because of the mystical nature of the true dragon's vein. Even when I took the true dragon's vein, I didn't pay much attention to the drop of liquid. Later on, the true dragon's vein stayed in the jade bracelet. Although I could absorb the dragon energy from it, I couldn't take the true dragon's vein out. As for whether the drop of liquid entered the jade bracelet with the true dragon's vein, I was even more confused. Fortunately, Tong Tong stayed in the jade bracelet. She should know the answer. I hurried to describe the drop of liquid to Tong Tong. "Have you seen it before?" I thought that she would have to think for a while, but she nodded immediately. "Yes, I have." I was excited. According to Yi Piampian, after taking the true dragon's saliva, my meridians would recover to their original state immediately. With that thought, I asked Tong Tong, "Can you take that drop of liquid out of my body?" Tong Tong sounded aggrieved. That drop of liquid has a lot of yang energy. Even her heavenly yin energy will be corroded when it gets close to that drop of liquid. Usually, when she stays in the jade bracelet, she has to avoid that drop of liquid. Now, I can't take it out. I had heard about heavenly yin energy from Tong Tong. It was the unique yin energy of her heavenly ghost infant. In terms of power and quality, it was much stronger than ordinary yin energy. It was also the power of a heavenly ghost infant. However, I didn't expect that even Tong Tong's heavenly yin energy couldn't get close to that drop of liquid. What should I do? With that thought, I couldn't help but feel upset. Tong Tong could feel my mood. She apologized to me as if she had done something bad. I felt sorry for her and tried to comfort her for a long time. However, Tong Tong was still a little disappointed. She didn't want to talk to me anymore. I want to go back and cultivate. Then she didn't say anything. At this moment, the car arrived at our county. I got out of the highway and took a taxi to the crematorium in our county. According to Yi Pian, my parents had been sent to the crematorium. Although many days had passed, if no one had claimed their ashes, they would still be there. When I arrived at the crematorium, I asked the security guard at the entrance. He confirmed that the crematorium would take care of the crematorium if no one claimed their ashes. Then, I hurried to the crematorium. Under the security guard's guidance, I found Director Liu, who was in charge of this crematorium. Director Liu was a fat middle-aged man. From his appearance, I could tell that he was a rich man. I had always heard that the crematorium was a good place. Even the cleaners could get a bonus of more than 100,000 renminbi at the end of the year. Looking at Director Liu's appearance, it seemed the rumors were true. When he saw me, Director Liu smiled and asked me to sit down. Then he said in an evasive tone, "The crematorium receives a lot of unclaimed remains every day. It's not easy to find them. Moreover, these are from a few months ago. It will take a long time just to look through the files." Then he said something like, "We don't have enough manpower." I understood immediately. He wanted money. I didn't have time to talk to him. "I don't care how much money you have to pay as long as you can help me find the remains." As soon as Director Liu heard me, the fat wrinkles on his face lit up. He gestured at me and said, "It's 50,000 renminbi. I can find it in one afternoon." The crematorium was indeed a good place to make money. However, I didn't have time to argue with him. I swiped my bank card and gave him 50,000 renminbi. Although I had given most of the money to Qin Xuanda, I still had several 100,000 renminbi with me. When Mr. Li brought my things here, I also had my bank card with me. I didn't lack money. After receiving the money, Director Liu immediately went to do his job. His efficiency wasn't just for show. He didn't even need to wait for an entire afternoon. I had only waited for around 1 hour when he returned with 2 jars. Seeing the 2 ordinary jars in his hands, I couldn't help but feel a sharp pain in my heart. Perhaps it was because Director Liu saw that my face didn't look good, so he said that he had something to do and left with a smile. He left the crematorium to me. At first, I thought that I would be very sad, but after this interruption, I didn't feel that bad anymore. After all, it had been 2 months since the incident, so I didn't feel that bad anymore. No wonder people said that time was the best medicine to heal wounds. Now, it seemed that it was true. I walked forward and hugged the 2 jars. I mumbled, "Dad, Mom, Samuel is so sorry. I'm going to take you home now. Samuel will take revenge for you. However, you don't need to worry. When Samuel takes revenge, he will protect himself and live well." Then I wiped my tears and prepared to leave. However, when I reached the door, I suddenly thought of something. Ashes weren't corpses, so why did Director Liu bring them to me so quickly? Could he have made a mistake? With that thought, I hurried to put the 2 jars down. It was easy to check if these were my parents' ashes. I just needed to use the ancestral seeking talisman that I had used on Lai Zhou's ancestral grave. However, my Tao energy was gone now, and I couldn't make any talismans. What should I do? After thinking for a while, I called Tong Tong. She looked tired, but I didn't notice it. I just told her what the ancestral seeking talisman looked like. Then I asked her to use her Yin energy to help me simulate an ancestral seeking talisman. The ancestral seeking talisman was a kind of Yin seeking talisman. Using Yin energy to simulate it would have a similar effect. Soon, Tong Tong was ready. Then I patted the ancestral seeking talisman on my body. A wisp of gray smoke flew out of my body and flew to an unknown place. Then he took out his phone from his pocket and looked as though he was about to call the security guards. My face darkened. I coldly glanced at him and let go of his hand. In the past, if I met such a person, I would definitely make him suffer. But now, I don't have any Dao Qi on me, so I can't be as straightforward and direct as before. Director Liu looked at, I let him. He turned to look and didn't even to me. He do himself returning. From the looks of it, he had probably done this many times in the past. I stood there and thought for a while. In the end, I left alone. I left the 2 jars in the crematorium. They were other people's ashes. Perhaps someone would come to claim them. Although I wasn't confident in my work in the crematorium, staying here would give me hope. It was better than being taken away by me. After leaving the crematorium, I didn't go far. I checked into a hotel across the street and stayed there. For the next 2 days, I was thinking about how to go to the crematorium to find my parents' ashes. It wasn't hard to find them. I just needed to ask Tong Tong to help me simulate the ancestral seeking talisman. Then I would sneak into the crematorium and follow the talisman to find the ashes. If it were before, it wouldn't be a problem for me. I could have done it in a few minutes, but now I had lost all of my power, and my body was still in a weak state. Not to mention anything else. I couldn't even climb over the walls of the crematorium that were covered with electric fences. Tong Tong could easily sneak into the crematorium, but he couldn't do it alone. The ancestral seeking talisman only worked within a certain range. I had to go there myself. With no other choice, I could only stay here and slowly nurse my body. I didn't dare to hope that I could recover my Dao Qi, but at least when my body was healthy, with the help of my eyes, I could sneak into the crematorium. That shouldn't be too difficult. Of course, I wasn't idle these days. When I had nothing to do, I would wander around the crematorium's entrance. I didn't find many valuable clues, but I bought a pack of cigarettes every day. Soon, I became familiar with the security guard. After getting to know him, I started to ask him for information. The security guard's surname was Wu, and he looked to be in his 40s or 50s. He was a good talker. When I asked about the crematorium's management of the crematorium's ashes, he pouted his lips and said, "What management? The water is deep here." I didn't understand, but old Wu seemed to be interested in chatting. He took a sip of tea and said mysteriously, "Do you know why the crematorium earns so much money?" I cooperated and shook my head. Old Wu slammed his hand on the table and sighed. "Because it earns money from the dead." I was confused. If the crematorium doesn't earn money from the dead, does it earn money from the living? When I asked him again, old Wu shook his head in pain. "I'm not talking about the business of burning people and selling the urns. Although this business earns money, it's not the main business of the crematorium. You outsiders wouldn't be able to guess that the real business is." Halfway through his sentence, I still didn't understand. Old Wu felt that he had said too much. He abruptly shut his mouth and took another sip of tea. Forget it. Why do I need to talk to a young man like you? Let's not talk about these things. When you have time, play a game of chess with your uncle. I hurried to give him the cigarette in my hand and pulled him to tell me more about the crematorium. Old Wu was a talkative person. After I pulled him, he told me some of the secrets of the crematorium. After listening to his explanation, I understood that what he meant by earning money from the dead was actually making money from corpses. Nowadays, the country promoted cremation. People who died in their homes in the countryside could still be buried in the dark. However, people who were sent to the hospital were forcibly sent to the crematorium. Moreover, the corpses of people who died in car accidents or in criminal cases were all sent to the crematorium. It was said that when a person died, the light would go out. But in fact, after death, only the soul would disappear. The body they left behind was still very useful. Old Wu was just a security guard, but he could casually talk about the organ trade, teaching, and many other uses of corpses. Each of these uses involved a terrifying amount of money. These were the places he had mentioned to make money from the crematorium. Of course, the crematorium didn't have the right to deal with the corpses. However, the main problem was that he could deceive everyone. According to the crematorium's rules, when a dead person was placed in the furnace, outsiders couldn't watch. This gave the crematorium staff a chance to take action. Usually, the crematorium staff would secretly detain the corpses that were in good condition when they were alive. Then, they would pretend to burn them in the furnace. They would find some ashes from the deceased and put them in a jar. Then, they would send them to the crematorium. It was just like what Director Liu had said. No matter who they were, after they were burned, they would turn into ashes. No one would be able to tell them apart. Because of the entanglement of benefits, Old Wu scoffed at my idea of managing the ashes of the corpses. The worst thing about crematoria was management. The more orderly they were, the more troublesome it would be to track them down. And the more chaotic it was, the more they could profit from it without any scruples. Chapter 175. After hearing Old Wu's words, I couldn't help but be shocked. Director Liu's attitude of accepting money and messing around had already infuriated me. I never would have thought that compared to the truth behind the scenes, what I encountered was nothing. After receiving money, not only would they not give you the corpses of your relatives, they would even sell the corpses away. They would either remove the organs or sell them to a medical school for students to dissect. If the relatives of these corpses knew what had happened, they would probably want to burn down the crematorium. I was in this state right now. It was like my heart was on fire, and I only had one thought in my mind. Did they sell my parents' corpses and ruin them? My eyes turned red as I thought about it. I couldn't wait any longer. I forced myself to calm down. After thinking about it, I said to Old Wu, "Uncle Wu, do you have a way to bring me inside?" Old Wu was stunned at first. Then he asked me, "Why do you want to go inside?" Then he seemed to have understood something. He stared at me and asked, "Kid, did you just get a family member sent here?" I didn't say anything, but I couldn't hide my expression at all. Old Wu jumped up from his chair as if he was stung by a scorpion. He waved his hands at me and said, No matter what you say, it won't work. Kid, why don't you think about it? There are so many benefits here. It's something a normal person can get involved with. The people here all have eyes and ears. If you barge in carelessly, I can guarantee that you won't even know how you died. After saying that, he even took a few steps back, as if he wanted to show that he wouldn't help. However, after taking a few steps, he couldn't bear it anymore. He turned around and advised me, "Kid, let me give you a piece of advice. The weak can't beat the strong. Just pretend that you don't know about this. No matter what, the living are more important than the dead." I stood there and didn't say anything, but my face was extremely gloomy. Old Wu clearly knew the severity of the situation. That's why he had such a big reaction. If it was before I lost my powers, no matter how scary his words were, I wouldn't care. But now, it seems that entering the crematorium isn't as easy as I thought. However, I didn't want to wait any longer. It had been 2 months since my parents' corpses were sent here. If something really happened, I wouldn't have the time to hesitate. With that in mind, I decided not to think too much about it. Since sneaking in wasn't going to work, I might as well take this path. I wanted to barge in openly. It was true that my body hadn't recovered, but I still had Tong Tong. She was an Een soul with the power of a ghost king. If she wanted to charge into the crematorium, how many people could stop her? Although this might cause some trouble in the future, I didn't mind it. It was nothing more than someone investigating me, and then investigating the Metaphysics Association. If old President Lee insisted on protecting me, what could he do in the end? After thinking for a while, I called Tong Tong in my mind. Then I walked toward the gate of the crematorium. After walking a few steps, I realized that something was wrong. Tong Tong didn't come out of the jade bracelet, and I didn't even get a response from her in my heart. What's going on? I stopped and called her a few more times, but there was still no response. Did something happen to Tong Tong? This time, I was completely bewildered. I stood there, not knowing what to do. At this moment, the security guard, Old Wu, chased after me. He pulled my arm and tried to persuade me. Young man, don't be impulsive. Think about it. Do you think it was easy for your parents to raise you? Are they willing to see you destroy yourself because of this? After a long time, I gave him a wry smile and nodded. Uncle Wu, you don't need to persuade me. I understand everything. This crematorium. I won't go in today. Old Wu heaved a sigh of relief and nodded. That's right. Then he pulled me to talk for a long time. However, I wasn't in the mood to listen. My mind was filled with thoughts of Tong Tong and my parents' corpses. When I returned to the hotel at night, my heart was filled with despair. My parents were dead, and I had lost all of my Tao energy. Even so, I eventually got out of my depression and tried to pull myself together. But now, my parents' corpses might have been defiled, and I had lost contact with Tong Tong. I was really bewildered. Tong Tong was inside the jade bracelet, and I couldn't get in. Of course, even if I could, I didn't have the ability to save Tong Tong. As for my parents' corpses, I couldn't do anything about them. If I couldn't even get into an ordinary crematorium, what use would I have? I lay on the bed in a daze for the whole night. When the next morning came, my eyes were still staring at the ceiling. It was as though I had returned to my previous numb and silent state. However, when the sky brightened, I instantly got out of that state and sat up with a face full of surprise. It wasn't because I had figured it out, but because I saw Tong Tong. This time, she didn't talk to me. Instead, she walked out of the jade bracelet and stood next to my bed. I asked Tong Tong what had happened last night with a face full of surprise. However, before I could ask, I saw that Tong Tong's body was covered in small wounds. How did she get hurt? Could it be that something really happened last night? I furrowed my eyebrows, but Tong Tong's lips curled up as she smiled happily. She skipped in front of me. With one hand behind her back, she extended her other hand and pressed it against my eyes. With a slightly weak voice, she said to me, "Big brother, close your eyes. I want to give you a present." Although I couldn't see them from the outside, their postures made me think that they carried guns with them. Old Wu was right. The people in the crematorium weren't easy to deal with. If an ordinary person came here, he or she would die a horrible death. Unfortunately, I wasn't an ordinary person. Regardless of whether it was these patrolling people or the dogs in their hands, under the effect of my Dao Qi, they couldn't sense my aura at all. Sometimes, even when I brushed past them, they wouldn't be able to detect me. As I walked, I soon arrived at a huge warehouse. Before I even entered, I could feel a chill just by standing at the entrance. This place was where the crematorium stored the corpses. The thick yin energy here had been accumulating for a long time. It had transcended a certain realm and turned into a bone-chilling cold. The temperature here was at least 7 or 8 degrees lower than in other places. I stood there and observed. Soon, I found that there were guards at the entrance of the warehouse. What surprised me even more was that I actually discovered a faint fluctuation of Dao Qi from the two people who were on duty. They were from the metaphysics world, although they were just two geomancy masters at the early stage of the dragon-seeking realm, and at the qi-drawing flow like Silk Realm, I was still shocked as a feng shui master, especially those who had already reached the geomaster realm. Although they were not considered much in the world of metaphysics, in the world of ordinary people, no matter what, they would still be at the level of a feng shui master. As long as these people were willing, it was hard to say if they were rich, but their income would definitely not be small. But now, two geomancy masters at this level were guarding this warehouse. How big of a business does the crematorium have? How could they hire these kinds of people? I suppressed the doubts in my heart and observed for a while. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, I slowly walked out. When I was in front of the two people, I waved my hands. The two of them didn't have time to react and instantly fainted. "That's right," I said with a smile. "That's right." Then I found the key and opened the warehouse door. After the door was opened, a cold and sinister aura came. However, I circulated my Dao Qi and dissolved it instantly. It was worthy of being the crematorium's cold warehouse. I lifted my head and saw many rows of corpses. All of them had ferocious eyes. I didn't know how long they had been dead. Although I had seen many dead people in the past few years, I still felt uncomfortable. I moved my eyes to the side and carefully closed the warehouse door. Then I took out the ancestral seeking talisman to find my parents' ashes. However, right at this moment, I felt another wave of Dao Qi. This wave of Dao Qi was much stronger than the two people outside the door. It was at least at the acupuncture realm.